You're now live.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this Google Hangout with the International Dark Sky Association. I'm Kelly Beatty. I'm on the board of directors of the IDA, and we've got a great and informative program lined up for you today having to do with lighting and safety. This is one of a series of 6 Google Hangouts that are being coordinated by the IDA's Education Committee, and we happen to have as our power behind the PowerPoint. The woman who chairs the Education Committee is Connie Walker, and she's at the NOAO. Connie, can you just say hi and tell us a little bit about the committee, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, the committee has a very kind of wonderful position in that we get to play. So we get to create things that the public can use and learn about dark skies awareness. So we did quite recently something called Losing the Dark, which has appeared now in almost, well, it's more than 14 languages. I think it's approaching 18 languages worldwide. It's a free planetarium program and also a video on dark skies awareness. And we're just very, very pleased that what we're doing is pretty much a natural extension of the International Year of Light. That we did a lot of programs during that time period, and the legacy lives on, and we are proud of our legacy programs, and this is one of them here for the International Year of Light, which you'll learn about from Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. And so 6 years ago now, there was the International Year of Astronomy to celebrate the 400th year since Galileo first used his telescope. And as part of that, IDA was intimately involved in creating a program of dark skies awareness. And that's kind of carried forward so that this year, which is being celebrated as the International Year of Light, there is a component of that which is called Dark Skies Awareness. This seemed like a natural fit. I'm sorry, Cosmic Awareness, Cosmic Light, and the Dark Skies Awareness is part of that. So we latched onto that and thought that, in addition to speaking in terms of light, let's also speak in terms of when you don't need light, or at least controlling light. And this fits entirely within the mission of the IDA, the International Dark Sky Association. We've been advocating for the control of the nighttime environment for more than 20 years now, since 1988. And so it's a natural extension of what we do. We have chapters all around the world. That's the international part. Chapters all across the United States, and so we're going to, if you can step to the next two. There you go. There you see the kind of the goals, and we've been really keen on protecting the nighttime environment, both in terms of just humans and the starry night sky, but also in terms of the environment itself. It turns out that lots of things in the biosphere are affected by light at night. We're becoming more aware of that day by day, and including humans. Humans can be adversely affected too. You've probably all had the situation where you slept poorly at night and you wake up all cranky, and that's a disruption of your circadian cycle, and light at night can really do that to you. It can interrupt that process. So there's a lot of research being done. We won't go into that. That was one of our prior Google Hangouts with Mario Mata and Richard Stevens, who are experts in the field. And you can, if you go to the IDA's section on Google Hangouts, you can replay that at a later time.
Uh-oh.
Just to mention again, Connie, the next slide talks about the IYL and the themes that we're trying to deal with, bring this sort of dark skies awareness to the cosmic light theme. And we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from the organizers of the IYL. They're happy to have the IDA involved. You see the website there, light2015.org. You can find out lots more, and in particular, you can get some links to Losing the Dark that Connie spoke about. But today we're going to concentrate on the effect of light on safety, and we have two real A-list people for this. The first is Nancy Clanton, who you see there down at the bottom, and Nancy she's a former director for the IDA, but she has been one of the champions, really out there in front in terms of fighting for really good quality lighting, and in particular doing a lot of original research on the amount of light and the quality of light that we need at night to see properly, to recognize when there's a car coming down the road, or for the car to recognize us, and she's going to be talking about that. Um, she chairs the Outdoor Environmental Lighting Committee for the IES, which is the Illuminating Engineering Society. So she is definitely a top shelf lighting person. She's nationally known, internationally known, and in great demand. The other person who's going to be speaking and joining us today is Leo Smith. Now, by day, he's a mild-mannered tax consultant for corporations, but by night, he is a tenacious fighter for lighting, improved lighting, especially on roadways. You can see there that he's a member of both the IES and the Standard Practice Subcommittee for Roadway Lighting. He's taken it upon himself to join these committees so that he can have an influence on behalf of you and me to try to advocate for better quality lighting. Leo lives in Connecticut, and I have to say, Connecticut is showing the rest of us what it's like to have statewide lighting legislation, outdoor lighting legislation. There's no fewer than 3 bills that have been passed on Leo's watch, and I'm very envious of his success there. So he's also involved in the Model Lighting Ordinance, as is Nancy, which is IDA's attempt to create a kind of template for cities and towns who might not know much about outdoor lighting, but they want to control light pollution. They're hearing from their citizens that the light at night is getting too much, and the MLO, as we call it, is a way forward that's sort of a plug-and-play application. And you can find out more about that on the IDA's website if you don't already know about it. So I think we should talk about these. This is the sort of subject matter that we're going to be covering today. We all need light at night. There's no question. We're a 24/7 society, and we do things that our grandparents and great-grandparents never did at night. And so we have, our social needs require us to have light at night. But there's good light and there's bad light, or as I say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we're going to be talking about some of the questions that you see there. What's the right level of light, the appropriate level of light? When do you need it or not need it? When is it actually bad? So I think with that, just as an introduction, I'm going to kick it over to Nancy and Leo, and they have a few slides that they're just going to show us some examples. And Nancy, Leo, take it away.
Well, can I interject one little comment? Anytime that you would like, the audience would like to submit questions, we can post them and see them. You won't be able to see them, but we can answer them after Nancy and Leo discuss these points they want to make.
Yes, thanks a lot, Connie. Yes. Okay. So this looks like a pretty bizarre kind of lighting situation. What the heck is this that we're seeing?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the light on top of this door, this is probably the most common type of what they call security lighting. And we refer to them as wall packs. It basically sprays light everywhere. And Leo has taken some great pictures of showing where wall packs are not effective at all. There's a lot of solutions to this, but I would say this type of wall pack is pretty ubiquitous as far as what they call security lighting. So, Leo, do you think this is a good example of security lighting?
It's a horrible example of security lighting. It blocks most of the light in the area where you really need it, which is at the door, and it's just such a waste of energy as well.
As noted by the roof there, that's actually doing the blocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And companies use wall packs, I think, in a lot of situations where they're just where they're being too cheap, or their circumstances don't allow them to really put poles with lights out in their parking lots. This is a way to sort of spray light into their parking lot without having to go to the trouble and expense of putting up poles. Right.
It's definitely the default on a building is to slap wall packs up. So next slide.
Supposed to go there.
There you go.
Leo, take it away on this one.
Imagine that you're a driver, you're coming down the road, it's totally dark at night, except You see these lights right in your face, right in your eyes. There's a stop sign there. Can you really see the stop sign? I would dare to say that maybe you really can't see it. And if you can at all, you probably don't see it until you get right up close to it, because the amount of glare that's coming out of those lights shining directly into your eye reduces your visibility. You can't really see. Nancy?
So what glare is our enemy no matter what. And I think that is going to be the common theme you're going to hear us talk about, is that if you have glare, it's harder for us to see. And glare intuitively, of course, is going to cause higher sky glow. And I think overall, minimizing glare, we're actually going to show you some examples of how to do it and some of the techniques to look at lighting equipment and determine whether its potential is going to be producing a lot of glare.
Okay, so, oh my goodness, look at that. Now I know what you would have faced facing that stop sign. So this has got to be a very ugly sort of lighting situation. Is this sports lighting? It's hard to tell. But is there a stop sign in that picture?
There is a stop sign in the picture, and it basically shows you that lighting that's off the roadway or adjacent to a property could actually be hazardous to the roadway. And we call this off right-of-way lighting. Could really affect. We have got some situations where you can't really see people going across crosswalks because of either sports lighting or a car dealership or a gas station has lighting that's really, really bright and affecting your adaptation to the important thing that you're trying to do in a scene, which is to see people or to see the stop sign.
And the answer is to shield the light so it only shines where it's needed.
Yeah, so we had a situation in that last picture where it was almost impossible to see the stop signs. Suppose you're, just walking around or trying to find your car. I think this next slide shows us how glare can actually be a safety hazard, a security hazard.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of us have experienced, we call this thing called adaptation, and the best example is walking into a movie theater in the middle of the day. It's hard to see anything, hard to see the stairs, and what this is, it takes our visual system time to adapt from something really bright. It's a protective mechanism in our eyes that our eyes kind of bleach out to protect our eyes from experiencing the glare. But this takes sometimes minutes to actually readapt. So glare is bad no matter what. And like this demonstrates that the more the glare, the harder it is to see things that are lit at a lower level.
Yeah, I'm a closet astronomer, and we experience this all the time. Your eye, people are familiar with the pupil of your eye expanding and contracting, and of course, when you get out in darkness, it does expand, but that's only part of it. There's a chemical change that goes on inside your eye that kind of puts your retina on steroids and makes it very sensitive to dim light. Our eyes do a really good job of that, but what happens is, because it does become so sensitive, when you suddenly encounter a really bright source of light, it can be disabling. And in fact, isn't that a kind of glare, disabling glare?
There is. There's actually several different types of glare. Disabling glare is exactly what this is. So much light goes in your eye and scatters that you can't physically see something at a lot lower brightness. Another type of glare is called discomfort glare, and that is it hurts. It's so glary. I almost call that put on your sunglasses type of glare. When people walk outside and squint, and this could happen with lights too. And then, of course, there is obnoxious glare, which is that light is in my window and it's shining all night, and I want to get rid of it. So many, many flavors of glare.
And sometimes there's even cases where the glare is really not that obscene in itself, but in the setting, it's horrible. An example would be that you're on a small lake or a pond where houses are built all around, and across the lake it is totally dark, and you can sit out on the backyard and look at the stars, and the night is so peaceful, except for the guy that's got these 3 bright lights shining out from the other side of the lake on his dock, and they just totally disrupt the tranquility of the dark surrounds.
Yeah, well, I want to address this picture that everyone's seeing specifically, because you can see in the lower right that there's actually a person hiding in the shadow there. It's not that your eye couldn't pick up that person, it's that the glare from the light fixture prevents you from doing that. And if you were to like shield your eyes so that the light source is not directly in your view, you'd pick up that's a person there in the shadows. But we don't exactly walk around at night with our head over our hand over our forehead like this. So things can be lurking.
Right.
Okay.
So let's continue to see what else. Oh, here's another example of that, right? Exactly what I just said.
Yes, and it is. It's getting your eye to be adapted to a lower, technically we call it luminance, to lower luminance, and our range in what we can see in brightness is finite within a scene. And like Kelly had mentioned, that we actually go through a chemical change in our eye, and it's either transient, which happens pretty quickly, or it's over time. And that's kind of the adaptation that we are chemically adjusted to.
Yeah, and I just want to interject here that we covered this in the medical one, that our eyes are especially sensitive to blue light at night, and a lot of the sources of light that are rich in blue wavelengths are especially annoying. And you've probably seen this on cars that are heading toward you down the highway when they have those newer style blue rich headlights. They are the most annoying.
Definitely.
All right, so
Sorry, I
look at that.
Yeah, well, I went too far.
No,
Go ahead.
back up a couple.
Okay.
We missed one more little example there. There you go.
That's the next one. Do you want me to go forward then?
No, it's okay. It's all right.
And this is just examples of different ways. You think that all light fixtures are created equal, but in this example where you could have floodlights and you think that you're lighting your merchandise, and we always go, what's the brightest thing in the field of view? Or what would you like to have the brightest thing? To me, if I were selling cars, I would want the cars to be the brightest thing and not the lights. And so poorly designed systems do just the opposite. So minimizing glare, shielding lights actually help everybody and all their needs.
And in this situation, it actually helps the car dealer in that the cars that are presented for public to look at on the right side, where the light is shielded and properly controlled, the vehicles are much more visually attractive to the viewer. In the situation on the other side, where the light is basically out of control, the cars don't look attractive at all. So it's actually a payoff for the seller, in this case, in outdoor sales, to put the light in such a way that it reminds you of a Marriott hotel. You don't see the glare. You just see the pretty little reflecting light. Same here with a car dealership. The car dealership makes out much better in terms of product presentation using properly controlled lighting.
And I think that car dealers are actually kind of catching on to this, both from the standpoint of improving the quality of illumination. Improving the quality of illumination on their cars, but also the fact that by controlling the light, you see there on the right-hand side, all of the light is pointing down. It actually saves them money doing so. I just want to remind everybody who's online to, if you have a question, please type it in, and we'll see it and get to it as soon as we can. So let's continue.
Okay.
I love this picture. One of the IDA board members actually did this. And he was at a door with what we would call typical security light, but totally unshielded. Connie, go to the next slide, and you'll see what happens when you shield the light. He was trying to pretend like he was a criminal going into the door, but you actually hide the people doing any criminal intent. That glaring lights, again, help them and actually shield them within a certain boundary.
Yeah, I have to say one of the toughest debates that we have in the IDA is convincing law enforcement and public safety officials that this kind of glare control is in their best interest too. So if you imagine that this pair of pictures that you're seeing is from the point of view of, say, a police officer driving by in a car, it's much easier to pick up on what's going on in the property if they don't have to fight glare in their field of view either. Okay, so what have we got here? Leo, I see a person down there at the end of the walkway.
Leo.
Yes.
I see a person down there at the end of the walkway. This looks like a perfectly reasonably lit scene to me. I can see them, they can see me.
Yeah, because they're right in the middle of the light.
And so
let's go to the next slide and see what happens. The student is moved 4 feet away. Can you tell where the student is? Most people cannot. But if you go to the next slide, you see that the student is standing right there next to the pole. And because of the fact that you have so much glare, you don't really see in the areas that are dark. And those dark areas are not really dark. There's a lot of light in those dark areas. It's just comparatively, there's not as much as there is obviously on the brightly lit sidewalk, and you can't see very well because of all the glare.
And you might say that this is like a trick of photography or something, and it's certainly the case that sometimes a camera doesn't show what the eye sees. But I've tried this myself in glary situations, and it's really kind of frightening how easy it is to be out of view when there's a strong source of glare in view.
Right, and and what we're doing here, besides just talking about glare, I want you to start thinking about contrast and how do we really see things. And right now, there's not enough contrast between the student in the shadows and the background of it. And so as we get into how do we light, this is a real important factor to do.
Oh, all right. So this has got to be one of the great misconceptions in the whole arena of lighting public spaces. I mean, isn't it true that if you add more light, it makes for a safer situation?
More light doesn't actually make it safer. There's been cases where municipalities want to put in more and more and more street lighting, especially in residential sections where you have very low levels of traffic. You have literally no pedestrian traffic. It's just that they think that it's going to make it safer. But a lot of times you find that there really is no statistical difference between sections of residential areas that are lit versus those that are not lit. It's just sometimes a question of how people feel as opposed to what actually is produced in the way of safety.
And so often lights are picked out because of what they look like during the day. They're beautiful, they're antique, they're historic, but very few people actually look at the performance of the lighting and how much glare they produce at nighttime. So this is really an important lesson, to get the light, put it up at night, and test it out before you do an entire streetscape with it.
And Nancy, isn't this an area where you've done some research in terms of what are the thresholds at which people can perceive something, some distance away? And it doesn't necessarily improve with more light on the scene, right? That's what you found?
Absolutely. It all has to do with contrast. And what I love about what IDA has done are these posters, which really get into this whole visibility issue. To give examples that can be open to the public on that it's all about visibility. And I almost wish that the whole term security lighting is misleading. We imagine floodlights and all that, and like the bottom picture shows, that may be looked at as a security light. But that's not really what it is. Security light is better visibility. If you go to the next slide, is kind of the finish of this poster. And security is completely different. It is, like we've been mentioning, no glare and better contrast. And yes, Kelly, like you mentioned, our research has shown that contrast is key.
And for those who can't quite make out what is being seen there, it's a picture of a torched car right underneath a street light.
Yeah. The bad people need light too to see what they're doing.
Well, I mean, doesn't having more light improve the crime situation? Does having less light increase crime and more light decrease crime? I think that's what most people carry around in their heads.
And they do, and that's kind of a misnomer, that more light does not decrease crime. I mean, crime happens during the day, and the light that we've gotten, in fact, we have gone out with the police, and it's extremely important to get your law enforcement agencies involved in lighting ordinances, because their conception is the more light the better. And one time, I've got a story, and when we went out with the city and brought everybody through different scenarios where we had actually dimmed the light in some areas, and we started in the police parking lot and we ended in the police parking lot. And when we handed the police officers the same questionnaire that we had started with, and they went, "Why are we doing this? We already rated this parking lot." I said, no, rate it again. Just kind of humor me. And they did, and they had the same ratings. Yeah, this is great, everything. And then we said, "Oh, we dimmed the lighting in this parking lot by 50%. And they're going, "What? We would have known that." And so then we took the dimmer and increased it, and they couldn't believe that they never picked up on that. So it was kind of convincing them that lighting level had very, very little to do with safety and security, and that it is how you light and not the quantity of light.
Right. Go ahead, Lou.
Sometimes there's an issue too with light that basically leaks out of buildings that's in the internal lighting that has an effect on sky glow. But when you consider, let's say that some business might want to have lighting on so that if there was a burglary going on in the hours when the place was closed, that the police could see inside that there's something was going on. Well, the answer to that really is you have the lights off as a matter of routine, and you have motion-activated sensors that will turn the light on if there is something inside going on. That way, the police officer coming down the street, when he sees that area lit inside that, say, furniture store, automatically knows to stop and take a look, because something must be going on if that light is on. Otherwise, the light is off.
And the thing is that this applies to homeowners especially. I know a lot of people who have these dusk to dawn security lights that shine in their backyard or on their driveway, and they think it's making them safer. So here we're talking about the security aspect, not the safety aspect. And the reality is that unless you're in the habit of staring out your front room window or your bedroom window out into your yard, you're really unable to see that somebody is there or not if the light's on all the time. A motion sensor makes so much more sense because the light comes on when something is in the field of view of that sensor. It scares the person and lets them know that they're suddenly vulnerable and exposed, and it lets you know inside the house that something's going on in your yard.
Very true.
So, all right, so let's kind of segue. We've kind of established that there is a basis for having control of light, control of the amount in street lights and parking lots. What are the steps that people can take to try to get some sort of regulation in place? Leo, I know this has been a strong suit for you. What are the first steps that someone should take if they want to affect a local ordinance or create
Probably
one?
one of the first things to consider is street lighting, because of the fact that there's just so much of it. One of the most effective examples of controlling street lighting took place in a place called Hartford, Vermont, where they formed a committee that represented all different aspects of interest, from police to safety and finance, all those different aspects. And the committee then went about making a determination on when a street light would be necessary. Now, they came up with 7 examples. One was an intersection, as an example, and different kinds: intersection, major road, minor road, that type of thing. And then what the committee did is they went out and inventoried every single street light in that town and determined whether it fit one of those 7 reasons to have a street light. About 2 out of 3 of every light in existence did not come up to the level that it met one of those 7 reasons. And you could save a tremendous amount of money by eliminating lights that really are not needed.
Yeah, and Leo, you were, like the intersections and where there are crosswalks and stuff. I think the lingo is conflict zones, right? Where you can have 2 cars or a car and a person. And yet, there's a lot of legacy lighting out there, left over from the 1950s and 60s in a lot of cases, where you'll be driving down a long, street, and there's like pole after pole after pole of street light, and there's nothing going on. It's a freeway or it's just a country road. That strikes me as the kind of light that you're talking about, where it's really not needed at all.
That's right. In addition to that, you also have situations where you could have, let's say, an area in a town that has pedestrian traffic up until maybe 10 or 11 o'clock, let's say. Maybe that's when the restaurants close down and pretty much the sidewalks roll up. Well, do you really need that street light to be on at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning? It
Right.
really does no good. So there are controls that you can use to turn street lights off during the times when they're not really needed.
And I have to say, I don't think we're going to get into the technology, the current lighting technology, but let me just go with this for a second. The advent of LEDs is really important in this regard, because I think the street lights that we're used to, the high-pressure sodium, the peachy-colored lights, which are pretty ubiquitous, those are really designed to be on for a long period of time. They can't be dimmed, and in fact, in most cases, they aren't metered at all. They're just on for a certain period each night, every night, and there's no hope of controlling them. But Nancy, the trend in the technology, especially in switching to LEDs, gives us at least the potential of controlling and dimming the lights, or having it even off when we don't need it, right? Oh, I think we lost. I see that we lost Nancy. All right, Leo. Leo, why don't you take that if you don't mind? The issue is that LEDs give us controllability that we didn't have before.
Yeah, and actually, the federal government is getting involved in that from an energy standpoint. But the kinds of controls that are out there are pretty phenomenal. and it will only get more sophisticated as time goes on. But they'll do things like maybe keep the lights at 30% until they see a car coming down the road. Then it might come up to 50 or 60%. They might turn off during times when they're really not needed. All of this has to do with the kinds of communications that take place from pole to pole, light to light, and then back to the center control system that governs all of the lights. So it's getting pretty sophisticated, and we'll probably see a lot of changes coming.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is that not a lot of towns are incorporating what you've just described, which are active controls on their LED installations. But here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, we did our city did exactly that. And Cambridge is a big place; it's like 500,000 people, and they installed a lighting system. There are a lot of, you know, it's an old city. The street lights are very close to a lot of the homes and apartments. And they have a system where the lights are dimmed to 50 or 70% of their, so they're on at, you know, their full brightness from, say, 7 p.m. to 10, and then the system automatically dims them down, not only because there's fewer people on the street, but of course the people in the houses nearby want to sleep. So, Leo, we're still waiting to get Nancy back. Let's continue with the slides we have here. This choice of how you light and what you light with has a bunch of different factors, and I see you, Connie. If we could go back to the one just before, the one that we had. It's not just about how bright the light is. There are other factors in there too, and you can see that too. Leo, what is spectral distribution? I think we've touched on the other ones a little bit. What's spectral distribution?
Spectral distribution might have to do, some light looks kind of yellowy, some of it might look white, some might look bluish, sort of like the way that you look at that car coming at you when you see those blue headlights. That has to do with the spectral distribution. Some lighting, like the light that is blue, will have greater impact on light pollution levels because of the shorter wavelength of the light ends up bouncing off the particulates in the air more frequently than a light wave would if it was a longer one, which is more on the red side.
Yeah, and lighting professionals have a way of characterizing this sort of bluish light, reddish light. They use something called color temperature. And even though it's a fairly recent innovation down at the consumer level, you can now get color temperature information for any light you buy. If you go down to one of those big box hardware stores and pick up a light to replace, you'll see a couple of characteristics that you're used to. How many watts does it use? How many lumens does it put out? But also you'll now see what's called the correlated color temperature, or the CCT, which is measured in degrees Kelvin. And so you probably have this notion of cool white versus warm white for an indoor bulb. Well, cool white will probably have a color temperature of around 5,000 Kelvin, and soft white or warm light about 3,000. And this is important. I mentioned earlier that a lot of ecosystems, nocturnal activity, our circadian function, are more sensitive to blue light. And so the IDA has established a threshold that we don't recommend any lighting, outdoor lighting, with a color temperature higher than 3,000 Kelvin. And it was a time, as little as 5 years ago, when there really wasn't much 3,000 K lighting out there. But especially with the advent of LEDs, a lot of manufacturers are picking up on this, and 3,000 K is now a lot more common than it was just 1 or 2 years ago. So if you're listening and your town happens to be getting involved in putting in LED streetlights, you should show up at those meetings and suggest that they use the warmest color temperature. And the thing is that we think of these warm, you know, glowy lights as kind of reds and yellows, but they actually do a very good job of allowing you to see what colors are around you at night, much better than was possible in the past. All right, so we're still trying to get Connie back. I'm sorry, we're still trying to get Nancy back. Why don't we, Connie, why don't we flip to the next slide? And Leo, this is an area where you've been involved a lot, I know, which is this notion of the model lighting ordinance and this really important distinction that we don't need the same amount of light everywhere in our nighttime environment. You want to talk about this map and what lighting zones are all about?
Lighting zones are basically there to accommodate for the fact that in an area where you have a high level of ambient light, you may need to light your particular area a little bit more than you would light it if there was no ambient light. And that's ambient light is another term for what light surrounds you. The important thing here is that in many cases, those exceptions in terms of, let's say, having a need for more light because you're in a high ambient light zone really applies only to what I'll call the streetscape. When you're walking down the street and you have all of those street lights and you have all of the neon signs and all of the light coming through the windows and so forth, you may need a little bit more light for what you're doing, but you really don't need more light in the parking lot behind the building because there isn't that ambient light level there. So in cases where you want to make it really simple, a lot of places will simply do an overlap where they'll take, let's just say, a business zone and say that that might be a lighting zone 2. Lighting zone 1 might be residential. Lighting zone 0 might be parks and places where you don't really have any lighting. Lighting zone 3 and 4 really are out there in terms of, exceptions. Like lighting zone 3 might be the downtown urban areas for major cities, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, that kind of thing. And lighting zone 4 is the exception to the exception. It's the Times Square, it's the Las Vegas Strip, where you have an unbelievable abundance of light in that situation. There are very few cases, but most of us would do well with just having lighting zone 0, 1, and 2.
Yeah, and this, Leah, how long? I mean, this notion of lighting zones is a fairly recent innovation, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And Nancy could tell us a lot about lighting zones too, because she was basically responsible for bringing lighting zones into IES in many ways.
Oh, exactly. In fact, one of the biggest issues that we have with lighting zones are communities trying to figure
out. Nancy, we just lost your audio. So.
How about that? Can you hear my audio? Oh, isn't technology awesome? So we've got these land use zones that will work with lighting zones. And you basically go through and figure out of how do you decide in places where you don't want any light at all, and that would be a lighting zone 0. This may be a park, it may be a preserve. Maybe lighting zone 1 is single-family residential. Lighting zone 3 may be your downtown area where there's a lot of activity going on during the night. Lighting zone 4, you'll notice is not here because that's reserved for Times Square and for Las Vegas, so we wouldn't have that. But it's very easy. We've done this for communities and also for the military. We've gone through bases and actually assigned lighting zones. So it's not that tough of a thing, but that is step 1, is to go through and decide that everyone has the same lighting zones.
All right, so maybe, oh, there we go. This is great. So this notion of lighting zones is actually an integral part of the model lighting ordinance. It's the idea, and you can the scale there on the left of what would be a reasonable amount of light if, say, you were putting in a business development. And I know that Nancy and Leo have both been intimately involved in the development of this. Take us through this chart here. What are we talking about? Every business or a homeowner? What is this intended for?
This is basically for commercial businesses. And notice it's hardscape areas, so it's only your parking lots, your sidewalks, it's not everything. And any lighting designer will know what a lumen is. A lumen is how much light a light bulb puts out, or your lighting fixture. So you basically add up all your square footage, which we notice that has to be done for drainage plans anyway. You add up your square footage of hardscape, and you multiply it by these different allowances, and that's the simple way. Now, homeowners has a much simplified way, which you will see in the model lighting ordinance on the IDA website with some guides on it. And there we just kind of talk about wattage. You can't have any more than so much light or wattage, you know, on your porch light. But this is really simple for most applications. But let's say you've got a very unusual application like a car dealer lot or something, or a gas station. We've been able to give you a little bit more light for those applications, but it's very, very specific for that.
Yeah, and you know, maybe we can slide ahead to the next slide. And I just want to remind, if people out there are listening and have questions for us, we are eager to get those questions from you. And so, if the lighting zones was one of the innovations that was embraced by the model lighting ordinance, a second was a whole sort of mind shift in the part of lighting professionals as to where the light from their fixtures is going, and I think this particular graphic here speaks to that. The bug system.
It is. This was kind of a fun thing that our committee came up with, was going, you know how we used to have the terminology full cutoff, which really only addressed light above the horizontal. And now we realized, you know, of our beginning slides, how important glare is, which is right in this upper angle of light. And so, as we can see with this, pretend that there's a light fixture and a pole right in the middle of this diagram. And it's light up above, which is sky glow, but then the G's are that high angle light of the light coming directly into your eye. And then we have the backlight, which is going to trespass on your neighbors. So we came up with these different bug ratings, and they are going to be applied directly to the model lighting ordinance. So if you have a lighting zone 0, your bug rating is 0. Lighting zone 1, your bug rating is 1. So it really plays into this. And fixture manufacturers now will tell you what the bug rating is of every single light that you specify.
Right. I've really been impressed with that. I've been looking at a lot of LED specifications recently, and they all have, you know, the uplight. It's a nice thing about LEDs. They're sort of intrinsically a no uplight kind of fixture. Glare is a different issue. And Connie, I know you're listening. I'd like you to chime in here. I know that you, Connie, did some research having to do with uplight. You know, we think of those satellite pictures that show light from cities streaming up straight up into space, but that's not actually what causes the most light pollution, is it?
No, you have things actually from a far distance. So if you were in an observatory and you had a city at even, say, 100 or 200 kilometers away, that light that's coming nearly at the horizontal angle can be an enormous influence to the sky glow that's above an observatory.
Yeah, it's the turquoise, the little turquoise slice there in that diagram, just above horizontal, but not very much. And if you think about it, a light like a flashlight that you point straight up, that light will exit the atmosphere pretty quickly. But if it's close to horizontal, it will skim through the atmosphere over great distances and all along the way creating light pollution. That's such an instructive diagram, Nancy. And so have you found in your dealings with lighting manufacturers that they've really embraced this bug system as a kind of quick gauge of the distribution of the light from their fixtures?
Absolutely. We have found no one who cannot give us a bug rating. And if someone can't give you a bug rating, I may stay away from their product. You can calculate the bug rating. There's a method on how to do it. We did it in our office in a simple spreadsheet. Very, very easy to calculate if you get the photometric data from the manufacturer. And so sometimes we'll teach manufacturers how to do it if they're not familiar with it. But I would say 99% of all manufacturers know this terminology and can give you the rating.
All right, so I think our next slide shows us the sort of outcome that you get when you design a fixture correctly. Leo, a lot of these look unusual to me, but some of them look pretty traditional. What's common about all these lights here?
What's common about all these lights is they're all shielded in a way where the light will go down but won't go up and will be controlled as to how much light may be shining across property lines.
And you know, one of the things that that we've sort of grown used to is a light, say, a street light on a cobra head, what we call a cobra head, with this kind of salad bowl underneath it, a glass lens that refracts the light and tries to distribute it. LEDs give us the opportunity to control the distribution of the light a lot more precisely than was possible in the past.
Especially the light that you see on the bottom row, second from the right. That's a flat glass lens. It's actually less expensive in terms of what it costs the manufacturer to make that. All LEDs now have flat glass lens type fixtures. And the beauty with the LED is they have individual lights that can be directed in different places, but all down. So that limits the amount of glare that you would have going, let's say, across the street and into an apartment window or things like that.
And I want to move on to the final slides we have, but Nancy, you've been involved in this game a long time, and what's your sense of the acceptance of these fully shielded, no uplight fixtures? Is that now considered best practice in the industry? Oh, let's see. Nancy, can you hear me? Leo, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. All right. So, Nancy, we're having trouble seeing you. So, we see you, but we can't hear you, or apparently you can't hear us. So Connie, let's move ahead to this next slide, just briefly, and talk. We dealt with this a little bit. Oh, great.
Yeah, and so what this slide basically shows is just kind of, you know, the whole process that we go through, looking at spectral distribution. You know, we had mentioned this earlier, that the spectrum of the light, you know, Kelly mentioned this, that blue light sometimes is more helpful than others. And so what this shows is try and get as warm of a light, more of an incandescent feel than a super blue one. You'll stay away from the headlight type of issue. And so that's important, that the warmer the light, the more like incandescence, the better, because there are some consequences to doing spectral distribution that's too blue.
Yeah, let me jump in here and mention that there's a celebrated case in Davis, California, where the town installed LED streetlights and really weren't paying attention to those spectral characteristics, and they were too blue. I'm trying to remember if they were 4,000 or 5,000 K. And the townspeople disliked them so much that they literally forced the city government to change them. And I think they've installed 2,700 K, which I have to say the quality of light from one of these warm LED fixtures is really a beautiful thing. It's not like an incandescent bulb. It's actually a much more satisfying glow to light streets and parking lots.
And we have found that people and communities really, really like the warmer color light. So I would highly recommend it, and to stay away from the super blue LED lights.
All right, we just have a few minutes left. Let's kind of jump through these last couple of slides. What is spectral tuning? We talked a little bit about dimming earlier.
Well,
what's the goal here?
What the goal here is what is available now with control systems is limitless. We can now see every single light, an IP addressable address to every single light, and this is very, very common type of control systems. So we can dim the lights, we can dim the lights during curfews, hours of curfews. You just don't need as much light when no one's there. But spectral tuning may be changing the color of the light as the night goes on. And especially when you are worried about too much blue light for circadian rhythm or for other things. And so, yes, spectral tuning, we're seeing it in interior lighting that a lot of the interior lights can change the color of the light as the day goes on. Now we want to apply to exterior lighting.
And I've talked to a couple of lighting professionals, not you, but others here locally involved in the Cambridge situation. How far into the future do you think it will be where we might have a street light that's, say, a little whiter in the mid, more neutral white, and then switch to a warmer color temperature to protect circadian rhythms later on at night? Is that soon to come?
Absolutely. We are now talking with manufacturers, and we're testing it out on a couple of college campuses, which will be this fall. So yes, it's unusual to have it, but it's definitely soon to come, and I think it will make a huge advancement on everything.
So let's switch to this sort of final text slide we got here. This is really what you've been talking about, right? Taking all these factors into play. It strikes me that the typical city manager doesn't really have this in his or her tool belt. This strikes me, therefore, as something that really getting a professional involved is the right thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. I would say let's dream about it. Can you imagine? I mean, look at what our phones can do. Our phones can track us and know where we are. Why can't the lighting know where we are and respond automatically to our location? Yes, we can have motion sensors on it, individually addressable lights, but let's go even one further step. In fact, Federal Highway Administration is looking at being able to detect, or a car won't be able to hit you if you have a smartphone on your possession. Just like vehicle-to-vehicle detection and how they brake automatically, cars could brake automatically for you, or the street lights could respond depending on where the car location is. Now, that you may go, oh, privacy, but if we have it, let's use it. So you could walk down the street at night and have a lot of different layers of light. Maybe it's just lighting really low, like little step lights to wayfind, or show you where everything is. But let's dream about this.
Leo, you've got your ear to the roadbed, so to speak, on a lot of the innovations that are being discussed among departments of transportation. Are they starting, just to wrap up here, are they starting to pay attention to all these factors we've been talking about?
They are paying attention, but what's interesting is you really have street lighting for two different reasons. One has to do with avoiding pedestrian conflicts, and the other has to do with avoiding crashes between cars or with cars only. And as we get a little bit further down the road, we're maybe talking 10 to 25 years from now, when you have a lot of semi-autonomous and later autonomous vehicles that don't really require human intervention, you also will no longer require lighting for highways and tunnels and toll booths and things like that, because all of the car's sensors will deal with things that are non-optical. It'll be radar, sonar, that type of thing. But that day will come when we no longer need any street lighting.
Wow, that's something to think about. No street lighting. Boy, those of us who are in the astronomical game would certainly welcome that. This has been a great conversation. I really want to thank the both of you, Nancy Clanton of Clanton Associates and Leo Smith of Capital Ventures Group. You bring so much to this conversation, and I just want to remind those of you who are watching this or who are playing it back that this is just the fourth of a series of 6 of these Hangouts, and our next one will be coming up on August 27th. The time on that will be 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern Time, or 1700 hours Universal Time, if that's the flavor you like. And our guests for that will be Travis Longcore and Andreas Hanel, who will be talking about the role that light pollution plays in wildlife concerns in the outdoor nighttime environment. So Leo, Nancy, thank you so very much for joining us. Connie, thank you for being the power behind us, making sure that everything seems to be working right. I want to thank you all on behalf of the International Dark Sky Association. That's darksky.org if you want to learn much, much more. And until our next Hangout, this is Kelly Beatty signing off. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.